Hello, everyone. We will regularly bring you stories you like. Daniel Harrington, a 42-year-old successful businessman, prided himself on running an influential engineering company founded by his grandfather. The company had thrived through 3 generations, evolving into a powerhouse in its field. Daniel's life seemed nearly perfect. He had a successful career, a beautiful home, and a loving family. He had been married to Rachel, his college sweetheart, for 20 years. They had 2 children, Jake, a 17-year-old son, and Emily, a 15-year-old daughter. On the surface, their life was the epitome of the American dream. Rachel, at 40, was a senior partner at a prestigious law firm. Known for her sharp mind and rigorous work ethic, Rachel commanded respect from her colleagues and clients alike. She was often the first to arrive at the office and the last to leave, her dedication to her job unmatched. Despite her demanding career, Rachel managed to balance her professional and personal life seamlessly, or so it seemed. Recently, Daniel noticed subtle changes in Rachel's behavior. She had become increasingly distant, often claiming the need to work late into the night. Her appearance, always polished, now seemed overly meticulous. She spent more time in front of the mirror, selecting outfits and applying makeup with a precision that struck Daniel as unusual. At first, he dismissed these changes as stress from her high-pressure job, but as weeks turned into months, his concern grew. Daniel's suspicions were heightened one Thursday afternoon when his assistant Claire knocked on his door. "Mr. Harrington, you have an envelope marked personal and confidential that just arrived," she said, handing it to him. Daniel frowned, taking the envelope. "Thank you, Claire," he said, dismissing her with a nod. He turned the envelope over in his hands, curiosity piqued. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Carefully, he opened it, revealing a single piece of folded notebook paper and a photograph. The note read, "Your wife is having an affair with Alexander." Daniel's heart skipped a beat. He unfolded the photograph with trembling hands. It showed Rachel and a younger man, Alexander Williams, standing close together at the entrance of a motel. They looked intimate, too close for comfort. Stunned, Daniel stared at the photo for a long time. Alexander was a 29-year-old man Rachel had known from her university days. They had reconnected recently, and Daniel had thought nothing of it. He trusted Rachel implicitly, but the photo planted a seed of doubt in his mind. The rest of that day passed in a blur. Daniel went through the motions at work, but his mind kept drifting back to the photograph. He recalled all the times Rachel had mentioned working late or attending business meetings. Were those all lies? Daniel's stomach churned at the thought. He knew he needed to find out the truth, but he didn't want to confront Rachel without solid evidence. That evening, as Rachel arrived home late once again, he greeted her with a forced smile. "Long day?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Rachel nodded, slipping off her heels. "Yes, another late meeting," she replied, kissing him lightly on the cheek. "I'm going to take a shower." As Rachel disappeared upstairs, Daniel's mind raced. He needed to know the truth. The next day, he contacted a private investigator named Christopher, who came highly recommended and had a reputation for thoroughness and discretion. They met in Daniel's office, where he laid out his concerns and handed Christopher the photograph. "I need to know if this is true," Daniel said, his voice tense. "I need proof." Christopher nodded, studying the photo. "I'll take the case, Mr. Harrington. I'll start by following your wife and gathering evidence. Discretion is key, and I assure you, no one will know I'm there." For the next few weeks, Christopher followed Rachel, documenting her activities. He installed a small tracking device on her car and used a high-powered camera to capture photos and videos from a distance. The evidence he gathered was damning. Rachel and Alexander met frequently, often at discreet locations. They shared intimate moments, holding hands and kissing in secluded spots. When Daniel received Christopher's report, he felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and sadness. The photos and videos left little room for doubt. Rachel was having an affair. Daniel sat in his office, staring at the evidence, his mind reeling. He loved Rachel and couldn't understand why she had strayed. Despite his emotional turmoil, he knew he had to confront her, but he wanted to do it on his terms and ensure he protected his interests. Daniel decided to wait for the right moment to confront Rachel. With Thanksgiving approaching, he saw an opportunity. They had planned a large family gathering, and Daniel intended to use the occasion to reveal Rachel's infidelity. Daniel's decision to hire a private investigator had been difficult but necessary. He needed clarity, and Christopher seemed the right person for the job. As Christopher began his surveillance, Daniel felt a sense of dread mixed with hope. He wanted to believe the best about Rachel, but the photo gnawed at his trust. Christopher's updates were brief and to the point. "I followed her to a hotel today," he reported one evening. "She met with Alexander. I got photos." Daniel's heart sank. "Did you see them go inside?" "Yes," Christopher confirmed. "They stayed for about 2 hours." Daniel clenched his fists, fighting back the urge to drive to the hotel and confront them both. He knew it would only complicate things. Instead, he thanked Christopher and asked him to continue gathering evidence. The days stretched into weeks, each one bringing new reports from Christopher. Rachel's pattern became clear. She would leave the office late, meet Alexander, and spend hours in his company. Sometimes they met at restaurants, other times in secluded parks. The intimacy in the photos was undeniable. One evening, Christopher called with an urgent update. "Mr. Harrington, I've got something you need to see." Daniel's pulse quickened. "What is it?" "I'll come to your office," Christopher replied. "It's better if you see it in person." When Christopher arrived, he handed Daniel a USB drive. "This has everything," he said. "Photos, videos, locations, it's all there." Daniel plugged the drive into his computer, bracing himself. The screen filled with images of Rachel and Alexander, holding hands, sharing intimate dinners, and finally entering and leaving hotels. The video clips showed them kissing, their affection evident. Daniel's hands shook as he paused the video. "This is enough," he said, his voice hollow. "Thank you, Christopher." "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington," Christopher said softly. "If there's anything else you need, let me know." Daniel nodded, barely hearing him. After Christopher left, he sat in his office staring at the screen. The evidence was overwhelming. Rachel was having an affair, and it was ongoing. That night, Daniel barely slept. His mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, betrayal. He replayed their years together, searching for signs he might have missed. But Rachel had been a master of deception, hiding her infidelity behind the guise of work. In the morning, Daniel decided he couldn't keep this to himself any longer. He called his lawyer Sharon and arranged a meeting. Sharon had been a family friend for years, and he trusted her implicitly. When Daniel arrived at Sharon's office, she greeted him with a warm smile that quickly faded as she saw his expression. "What's wrong, Daniel?" He handed her the USB drive. "You need to see this." Sharon watched the videos in silence, her face growing stern. "This is serious," she said finally. "What do you want to do?" "I want a divorce," Daniel said firmly. "But I need to protect my assets. Rachel can't take everything." Sharon nodded. "We'll make sure of that. Let's start by reviewing your financials and any documents Rachel might have signed. As they worked through the details, Daniel felt a sense of grim determination. He had loved Rachel, but her betrayal had changed everything. Now he had to think strategically, ensuring his company and his children's future were secure. With Thanksgiving approaching, Daniel saw an opportunity to confront Rachel in a way that would leave no doubt about her infidelity. The family gathering would be the perfect setting to reveal the truth, ensuring she couldn't deny it or spin a different story to their friends and relatives. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, Daniel and Sharon worked tirelessly to finalize their plan. They reviewed every detail, from the divorce papers to the financial documents that would protect Daniel's assets. Rachel had unknowingly signed a document giving Daniel power of attorney over their joint assets, which would be crucial in the upcoming battle. Daniel continued to act normally around Rachel, maintaining the facade of a loving husband. He found it increasingly difficult, especially as Christopher's reports continued to arrive. Each new piece of evidence fueled his anger and determination. On the morning of Thanksgiving, Daniel woke early, unable to sleep. He went for a run, hoping the physical exertion would clear his mind. The crisp autumn air helped, but the weight of the day's impending confrontation hung over him like a dark cloud. When he returned home, Rachel was busy in the kitchen, preparing the turkey and various side dishes. She smiled at him, her eyes bright. "Morning? Ready for the big day?" Daniel forced a smile. Of course. Everything smells. They worked together to get the house ready, setting the table with their best china and arranging flowers. Family and friends began to arrive in the early afternoon, filling the house with laughter and conversation. Daniel moved through the crowd, greeting everyone with a smile that felt more and more strained. As dinner was served, Daniel found it hard to eat. His stomach churned with a mix of anticipation and dread. He glanced at Rachel, who seemed genuinely happy, laughing with their children and chatting with their guests. It was hard to reconcile this image with the woman in Christopher's photos and videos. After the meal, as everyone gathered in the living room for dessert, Daniel knew it was time. He stood up, clearing his throat. "Excuse me, everyone. I have something important to share." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. Rachel looked at him, puzzled. "What is it, Daniel?" He pulled out the USB drive and plugged it into the television. "I've always valued honesty and trust in our relationship," he began, his voice steady but firm. "But recently, I've come across some information that has shattered my trust." Rachel's confusion turned to alarm. "Daniel, what are you doing?" "You'll see," he said, pressing play. The video began to play, showing Rachel and Alexander together in compromising situations. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the evidence unfolded. Rachel's face turned pale, and tears welled up in her eyes. She stood up, shaking, and tried to speak, but Daniel cut her off. "There's no need to explain, Rachel. The evidence speaks for itself." The room was silent, the atmosphere heavy with shock and tension. Family members exchanged bewildered glances, unsure of how to react. Rachel, her composure shattered, fled the room, leaving a trail of whispers and stunned silence in her wake. After the guests had left, Daniel and Rachel sat down to talk. Rachel was visibly distressed, her usually composed demeanor in ruins. "Daniel, I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Daniel listened quietly, his face expressionless. "Why, Rachel? Why did you do it?" "I don't know. she sobbed. I felt lonely and Alexander was there. It was just supposed to be a distraction. It doesn't mean I don't love you. Daniel shook his head. Love? You've humiliated me and betrayed our family. I don't see how love fits into this equation. Rachel reached out to him, but Daniel pulled away. I've already filed for divorce, he said coldly. I've also taken steps to ensure that you won't get a single cent more than you deserve. Rachel's initial shock turned to anger as she realized the extent of Daniel's preparations. She contacted her legal team, confident that she could fight back. However, when she reviewed the documents Daniel's lawyer had prepared, she discovered that he had been meticulous. The power of attorney she had signed gave him control over their joint assets, and Daniel had already moved significant portions of their wealth into accounts she couldn't access. Rachel's lawyer, a seasoned attorney named Mark, was impressed by the thoroughness of Daniel's plan. He's covered all his bases, Mark admitted. It's going to be tough to challenge this. Rachel's anger turned to desperation as she realized the full extent of Daniel's actions. She tried to appeal to his sense of fairness, requesting a private meeting to discuss their situation. Daniel agreed, meeting her at a neutral location. Daniel, we don't have to go through this bitter fight, Rachel said, her tone pleading. We can come to an agreement that benefits both of us. Think of the children. Daniel looked at her, his expression hard. Rachel, you made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences. My priority is protecting my interests and our children's future. There's nothing more to discuss. Rachel realized the futility of her efforts. She had lost not only her marriage, but also her financial security. As the court proceedings continued, it became clear that Daniel would emerge victorious. The legal battle began, with Rachel determined to fight for her share of the assets. She spent countless hours with her legal team, poring over documents and trying to find a loophole. Meanwhile, Daniel remained resolute, his plan unfolding exactly as he had anticipated. Rachel's confidence wavered as the weeks went by. She had underestimated Daniel's resolve and the extent of his preparations. Her once formidable legal team seemed powerless against the ironclad documents Daniel had in place. In a desperate bid, Rachel tried to appeal to Daniel's sense of fairness. She requested a private meeting, hoping to negotiate a settlement. Daniel agreed, meeting her at a neutral location. Daniel, we don't have to go through this bitter fight, Rachel said, her tone pleading. We can come to an agreement that benefits both of us. Think of the children. Daniel looked at her, his expression hard. Rachel, you made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences. My priority is protecting my interests and our children's future. There's nothing more to discuss. Rachel realized the futility of her efforts. She had lost not only her marriage, but also her financial security. As the court proceedings continued, it became clear that Daniel would emerge victorious. As the legal battle intensified, Rachel uncovered a surprising detail. Alexander had been involved in several other affairs, some of which had financial implications. Rachel realized that Alexander had manipulated her and others for his gain. Armed with this new information, she decided to confront Alexander. Meeting him in a quiet cafe, Rachel laid out her findings. You used me, she accused, her eyes blazing with anger. You never cared about me. You were just after money and power. Alexander tried to deny it, but the evidence was clear. He had indeed been using Rachel and others to further his own interests. Rachel's confrontation with Alexander provided her with a small sense of closure. She had been a pawn in his schemes, and now she knew the truth. But this revelation did little to change her dire circumstances. Rachel returned to Daniel with the new information. "Daniel, I know I've hurt you, but Alexander was using me. He's been conning several women, not just me." Daniel listened, his expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry, Rachel, but your choices have consequences. We can expose Alexander together, but it won't change our situation." Rachel nodded, accepting her fate. "I understand. I just wanted you to know the truth." Together, they exposed Alexander's deceit, bringing him to justice. It was a small victory, but it did little to heal the wounds between Daniel and Rachel. The divorce was finalized, and Rachel moved to another city to start anew. She faced professional and personal challenges, but she was determined to rebuild her life. Daniel, meanwhile, focused on his company and his children, finding solace in their support and love. Though their paths had diverged, both Daniel and Rachel learned valuable lessons from their ordeal. They discovered the importance of trust, honesty, and the consequences of their actions. Years later, Daniel and Rachel remained cordial for the sake of their children. They had both moved on and found new beginnings. Daniel's company continued to thrive, and Rachel eventually rebuilt her legal career. If you like our stories, please subscribe to our channel so that I can push better stories to you.